All right. Well, thanks for coming, guys, and sweating a little bit with us. Now we get to nerd out a little bit and hear all about Mary Catherine and her expertise. So, for those of you guys that don't know me, I am a health and nutrition coach. I work with clients here in the area directly, as well as with functional nutritionists or functional providers, and provide the nutrition counseling alongside of what they're doing and help people with habits and routines that will help them implement nutrition for the long term. And this is Mary Catherine, and I'll let you introduce yourself and tell about what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a registered dietitian, which is a little bit different than Brit's background. But essentially, I'm an RD. I'm also a certified fertility dietitian. So I do a lot with nutrition counseling, custom meal plans, really meeting people where they're at. Also the habit formation part. And everything I do is evidence-based. So making sure that everything that I'm recommending is rooted in research.
So with her being fertility focused and with both of us being so passionate about food, I want to start off with the food piece of things. So what are some foods that you think are like nutritional powerhouses for supporting the amazing process of getting pregnant, supporting hormones, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so a lot of things that apply to fertility apply to other areas too. So even if you're like, I don't care about that part of it, there's a lot of overlap. So for example, berries, awesome. Great antioxidants, great for anti-inflammatory, have brain health benefits, as well as obviously that fertility piece. Our probiotic food sources. So if you can't tell, we kind of plan the breakfast a little bit around that. So things like your yogurt, kefir, kombucha, all those probiotics really feed that gut bacteria that's implicated in hormone production as well. And omega-3s are another big one too. So omega-3s, another anti-inflammatory one, they help promote blood flow as well. And so things like your fatty fish, your chia seeds, walnuts, flax seeds, all provide those omega-3s.
And something that I think is not well known is, especially in the fertility process and like the development of a fetus, one of the first things that develops is the nervous system. So what are some things that you can speak to for like how important it is to nourish yourself all the time so that should you become pregnant and the first thing that's developing is that nervous system, like how could you really support that process?
Yeah, so for females and males, there's a big misconception around this, but females and males, what you eat 90 days before you conceive that fetus, that child, impacts that child. So for women, what you eat 3 months ago impacts the egg that you ovulate 3 months later. And so that's why it's really important to have that preconception nutrition on board, not just, retrospectively reacting, but having that on board. So choline especially is great for brain development. So that's in egg yolks, which used to be a really cheap food source, not so much anymore. But we also do have choline in things like soy and white beans and leafy greens as well. So we can get other sources. So that's a really big one. And then everything else I mentioned as far as those omega-3s, and then vitamin D as well plays a really big role. So vitamin D deficiency is actually associated with an increased risk of miscarriage. And that's true for the male and the female side. Again, there's a lot of, in the fertility space, there's a lot of times where it all falls on the female, but really it's a joint effort. And so vitamin D food sources, fatty fish, vitamin D enriched eggs, vitamin D fortified dairy products can all help get that status.
Getting outside, right? Getting sunlight,
yes.
Getting that natural vitamin D as well.
Well, it's tough in the winter. Above a 37 parallel, you actually don't create much vitamin D from the sun exposure. So that's a really weird, fun fact of the day for you guys. So even if you're outside all day, every day in the winter, that production is significantly less than in the summer.
And then there's an interesting connection, I feel like, for you gentlemen especially, that we both were nerding out about when we talked before, is how much the vitamin D piece plays into testosterone as well, and how that's like super connected to a male's fertility, male health in general. So anything in particular you'd want to touch on for the vitamin D testosterone picture?
I love helping men with low T raise T through nutrition. I think it's one of the most fascinating things ever. So vitamin D, of course, plays a really big role there, but also your minerals, things like zinc, magnesium, selenium, all impact testosterone production. There's also a few studies that have come out that say disproportionate amount of protein, especially in the context of low carb, can potentially drive testosterone down. So that's another reason you want to get balance, especially in the macro side of things when it comes to male fertility.
Which is interesting with the mentality mostly being like have as much protein and like don't even worry about any other macronutrients, right? But it's really important to be balanced and having the carbs and the fats to give you the energy production, still give you that fats for the hormones, for actually producing the testosterone. Like it's mostly made of the sterol that comes from your fats that you eat. So if you don't have all of the components, then you can't produce that testosterone even still. Both of us being really big on the habit and routine side of things, I'd love for us to kind of go down the side of when you're actually like going through preconception health or even just trying to better your health in general, meal planning in particular. I know that you are big for giving out meal plans, and you're actually doing a challenge that you're welcome to speak about as well. But I think it's really powerful to put that intention into your week and really plan out your week so that like you're sitting down, whether it's Sunday, whether it's Monday, whether it's you plan out on Wednesday or whatever, like it doesn't necessarily matter when, but taking that time to say like this week I want to have this and this for my meals, you know, these are my protein sources. So is there just any tips that you have for how you like to do that or how you instruct clients to go through that process?
Yeah, so I think there's two different ways of doing it. There's me doing the plan and doing all the calories, the macros, everything on the back end, where it's kind of a plug and play. Like you have the recipes, you have the grocery list, you fill it in. All you have to do is prep and eat the food. It's very simple. When I'm working with clients on more so facilitating your own creation of meal plans, I usually like to use kind of a performance plate style. So quarter to third is your protein, quarter-ish is your carb, and about half is your fruits and vegetables. That's kind of my go-to. So I always recommend like draw that empty plate on a piece of paper, divide it up, and then put in each category what you like, and then try to do a mix and match. So especially when we're talking about gut health and the implication with gut health and fertility and hormones, we want to get a lot of diversity in our diet. So eating the same thing every day is good as you're trying to get into a routine. Once you've got that routine down, really trying to introduce new foods is really the name of the game.
Yeah, and that kind of ties in nicely to where I want to go next with the conversation is like when you're talking about like cycle syncing. And that's something that I feel like is everyone on social media is like you realistically can plan your whole life around your cycle. You could work out according to your cycle, you could eat according to your cycle, take herbs or whatever, right? Like you could really be very specific about that, which I'd love for you to speak to if that's something that you recommend or not. But something that I think is powerful for my clients is like, well, let's look at what phase of your cycle and let's get to know those different phases and what your body needs during those different phases. And let's use that as your ways to add that variety and saying like, okay, so this week, you know, I'm in my luteal phase. I'm really detoxifying those estrogen molecules. So I'm gonna eat a lot more broccoli and cruciferous veggies. And those are gonna be my variety that I bring into my diet for that week.
Yep.
Is that kind of a strategy that you would recommend, or do you have anything that you like to work in with your clients?
Yeah, so I always meet clients where they're at. For some people, they're like, I've got all this the basics down. I've got the solid foundation. I can go to this level of complexity. And then for others, it's, I don't even know where to start. And so I'm really about what's going to work for that person. And instead of being prescriptive, more so facilitating their goal creation and their goal setting and their goal achievement. So I think for some people it's great, and I definitely can use that. And do use that with certain individuals, but the vast majority, I would say, I'm just trying to get you into healthy, sustainable habits, because the way I see it is if you can't do what you're doing today 10 years from now, that's not necessarily sustainable. Or if you're like, I don't even want to imagine doing this a year from now, that's not sustainable. So how can we create those sustainable habits that, especially once you get pregnant and you introduce a new baby into your life, can you actually uphold those? And do you want your baby following those same footsteps? And sometimes it's an absolute yes. Like there's certain habits where like, yeah, I absolutely want to pass this down generationally. But then historically we can look and we have like a diet culture, like generationally of, you know, my grandmother was on this, my mom was on this, my aunt's been on this, whatever it might be. So really being intentional about how you want to do that. In terms of the cycle syncing part, when we look at the research, there's not a very strong evidence for why we need to push that. That being said, some females feel way better doing that. So there's nothing wrong with that. I always say like it's an N of one. Like when you look at yourself and your own habits, how does that feel? But as far as, you know, always prescribing that, when I look at the research, it's not strong enough to be like, you have to do it this way.
And I totally agree. And I feel like when we talked about it before, it was like, there are so many like underlying things that we want to get down first, right? Like I think both of us, most of the women that we work with are not eating enough food, right? Like that is the bare minimum. It's like, I don't really care about you being intentional of like having pumpkin seeds at one phase during your cycle if you're not eating enough protein, right? Like we really got to start with these building blocks and build up to like, sure, if you want to eat pumpkin seeds during your cycle, like it's definitely not going to hurt anything. It's not going to be something that will be detrimental to your journey at all either. But like, is that really establishing something that is like that groundwork of like, I think food is so foundational. If we don't have those foundations of just feeding ourselves, that like, some of the cycle syncing stuff just feels like it gets lost in the weeds, and it just is even more complicated sometimes.
We're like trying to add too many things to the walls when we don't even know the foundation of the house. It's like, okay, I'm going to decorate, but like the foundation's not there yet. And also, you know, you mentioned pumpkin seeds, shifting it back to the male fertility side. Those are a great source of magnesium, great source of healthy fats, so that can help with that testosterone production as well.
Actually, while we're kind of touching on the male and the female, I'd love for you to do your percentage.
I was trying to count. We don't have 10 people. We have 9. I was like, is there another person? No, I'm like, there's someone else somewhere. So we'll roughly do it. That ball will be our 10th person. So if we are looking at fertility, what percentage of the time, I'm going to make this an open question. What percentage of the time do you think that it's only the female that's the reason for infertility? Okay, 10%. I'm just going to keep going up. Anyone?
I at one point would have thought like 50%.
Right.
Like half of it, if not even more, because it's the woman that carries it. And so then I feel like that's the perception, is that it's mostly the female that's responsible.
Yes. So if we are going of 100%, or we're going with 10 people, we're just going to break us up. So 3 of us would be female-only factors. 3 would be male-only factors. 3 would be a combination of male and female. And the 1 medicine ball, Bosu ball, whatever that is, the 1 is going to be unexplained. So a lot of times females really take the brunt of it, but we can say that 3 out of 10 times it's only the male factor. 3 out of 10 it's shared, 3 out of 10 it's just females, and 1% of the time it's unexplained, or 10% of the time it's unexplained.
And are there any factors that you like to, that can kind of help us figure out which of the percentages we're looking at? Like if someone comes to you struggling with fertility, are you kind of helping analyze like, oh, this is more leaning towards the male, or are you just kind of supporting the whole general fertility picture, and then that will kind of trickle into all of those percentages?
So it's a bit of a tricky question because it kind of depends on scope. If I'm looking at dietary factors, I can guess, but really there are some concrete tests that can be done that help pinpoint that. So one, I'm always looking at like, is the female even having a regular cycle? Like, what does that look like? If your cycles are 40 days, 60 days, 20 days, like, okay, it's probably going to be pretty hard to conceive and know when that fertile window is. Is the male or is the female, are they both drinking? Are they smoking? Are they using nicotine products? What does that look like? So I can evaluate from that lifestyle behavior point, but really it comes with a full workup from a physician to actually look at, are there any anatomical issues with the female that might be coming into play? Of course, we can do like a semen analysis, look at that. One thing I really love about assays is that we can actually make a really big difference with supplements and nutrition. So I think a lot of times it's like, oh, my partner has low motility or low sperm count or whatever that might be, and it's automatic, like, let's go for this medical procedure, when really there's a lot we can do on the nutritional side to correct that answer.
And then I know you have a pop quiz that we want to ask everybody of, do you guys know how many days out of a month that you're actually able to get pregnant?
Okay, we got a 3, we got a 5. Guys, want to guess?
Okay.
2.
Nice. Okay.
Wow.
Good. Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's like, well, we just do it every day, so I'm like 5. So yeah, it's about 5-ish days. So it kind of fluctuates depending on some other factors.
And that's what you referenced, that fertile window. And
yes,
so if you're not having regular cycles and you're not able to track when you're having that fertile window,
right,
when you're ovulating and then having your bleeding, like that's where you're able to fall through the cracks when you're in a fertility journey, right?
Exactly.
It's harder to then know when your pregnancy, like the risk of getting pregnant is at a different stage of the month if you're not actually able to track that and know when that's happening.
Exactly.
Do you have any specific like tracking your cycle tips for anybody?
So everyone's different. Some people are like, I want pen and paper, I want to write it down. Some people want a calendar. There's a lot of BBT thermometers nowadays. You put it under your tongue. It's like first thing in the morning. It gives you a pretty chart. So you can track it that way. Some people do like the cervical mucus method. Everyone's different, again, in what their preferences are. Some people do the ovulation predictor kit. So again, it's meeting people where they're at and then making sure they know how to actually use the tools. I had a client who was like, yeah, I have these kits and I'm just doing them every day. It's like, that's great. It's not necessarily going to help you if you're doing it, the same day you start your cycle. So understanding, what are the benefits, and then also knowing that at the end of the day, none of those are foolproof. There's always going to be a margin of error with all of them.
Cool. And then anything as far as like the endocrine disrupting, like we see so much of that on social media as well, of like so many toxins in the air and how that impacts like specifically our hormones. And so is there anything that you like to touch on? Like if you have somebody that comes to you of like freaking out about all of these endocrine disruptors, like what is something you might guide them through that process with?
So one, I don't think anyone needs to go like throw out everything in their house overnight. A general rule of thumb is like, as you get rid of something, replace it with something better. There is a lot of greenwashing. So basically it makes it look better than it is. EWG is one really great resource that helps you vet labels so that you can understand like what's in those products. And then it's called Environmental Working Group. And then they'll rate them based on their risk factors. They also have like specifically a reproductive category. So in general, I'm less is more. Like instead of bleach or all-purpose cleaner, maybe we're using vinegar and water and some dish soap. Trying to slowly fade those things out. When it comes to food, glass or ceramic, trying to get rid of the plastic in the house. Even if it's BPA free, BPA is one of the most well-known endocrine disruptors. But even if it's BPA free, it is still plastic and microplastics at the end of the day. Reusable water bottles, glass food prep containers, things like that. And then just also know, like, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. And that's true for everything with food, nutrition, lifestyle. Like, you get into this all or nothing, like, you're not going to buy anything this weekend. So giving yourself a little grace and leeway with that as well. And then also shopping local. So Simple Body is one of my favorite brands here locally for all the skincare products. They don't use any like synthetic products in their, or synthetic chemicals in their products. They're all made in-house. So that's one I've personally vetted, and there's many more, but that's just one I know.
Yeah, and I think touching on that as well, like when you're looking at your overall health and the products that you're using and the things that you're putting in and on your body, it's kind of like you want the majority to be free of those endocrine disruptors or having less of them or whatever. But I feel like you said we can be psycho with it also.
Yeah.
And I think that the perspective of why we're doing that is because your liver has to detoxify all of that, as well as your hormones, as well as all of the other jobs that it has to do. And so why we're taking away some of those other endocrine disruptors is just to give your liver a break and just to make it have less that it has to go through. And so it's not necessarily to be like, we have to take them away or else like they're immediately going to go into our body and like harm us. But it's just because our liver really does take a brunt of the work in detoxifying just from our daily life. And so if we can take steps to help mitigate that and help not have our liver work through so much and not have to work so hard, can really make a huge difference when we're on this fertility and hormone journey. So the last thing that I want you to tell us is you have a specific snack formula that you've teased, and she won't even tell me what this formula is. So I can't wait to hear.
So my go-to snack formula is always start with a fruit, a vegetable, or a carbohydrate, ideally a high fiber complex carb, and then add a protein and or a healthy fat. So a lot of us will grab one thing as a snack, and that's kind of it. But instead, we really want to build a balanced snack. One, that's going to help make sure you've got a balance of those macros we talked about. Two, make sure you have those fiber and fats on board to actually stay full and satisfied. And that can also level energy levels and also level blood sugar. So especially with fertility, we're always looking at blood sugar regulation as well, insulin resistance. PCOS has a higher rate of those things, but that doesn't mean anyone else doesn't struggle. So examples would be like an apple and peanut butter, or Greek yogurt and berries, carrots and hummus, bell peppers and guacamole. So really pairing the two things together so you have that no-fail snack.
And I feel like just the snack formulas, adding more good nutrients into your body, like looking at those endocrine disruptors, like it's really all just coming from this perspective that especially a female body, but males too, like our physiology is wired to reproduce. Like that is what our bodies are looking to have a baby. Like whether we are actually having that as our goal right now or not, like that is what our hormone systems are after. That is what our safety meters, like that is what our body is consistently looking for, is like, can I have a baby right now or not? And so that safety piece, that making sure that you're taking time to be able to be calm, be able to get into that rest state, be able to eat those foods that are nourishing you so that your body feels safe, regulating your blood sugar and helping those hormones really be productive and be able to do their jobs. And that makes your body feel safe so that even if you're not trying to have a baby, your overall hormone functioning systems are just functioning the way that they're supposed to. And for guys, you guys as well, like that's how your testosterone system like is such an integral part of your overall physiology that yes, fertility, it feels like such a small window and such a small phase of our life that maybe that is a focus of like we're actually trying to have a baby, but these hormone systems are so prevalent to our physiology that we really can't separate them from just our overall health as well.
Yeah, I mean, even to put that into greater perspective, like estrogen is linked to bone health. So even if you're not trying to conceive, we have implications on our other systems.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, does anybody have any questions for Mary Catherine or myself?
Yeah, there absolutely is, especially if you're thinking about all those like anti-inflammatory foods. There can be a connection there. We also have an entire field called nutritional epigenetics. So basically what you eat today impacts the egg you ovulate 90 days from now. If that ends up to be a developing child, that can impact them into their adulthood. So it can impact your own labor delivery process, your own symptoms throughout that. Of course, we're looking at nutrition throughout that entire pregnancy too. There are some things that are harder to control than others. Like I'm not going to say nutrition's a cure-all, but we do know that there is a really big connection, especially in reducing risk of complications. So things like preeclampsia, just high blood pressure, things like gestational diabetes, that can impact baby's birth weight. We could also have macrosomia where they're larger And so obviously that's going to impact delivery if you're delivering a larger baby through natural ways. And so we know that by kind of cause and effect relationship there, that there are a lot of relationships between the two.
And I feel like I love looking at things from a biological perspective as well, that it's like if you're thinking about, you know, these different hormones cascades that have to happen for a labor to occur, that requires how many different amino acids, how many different minerals, how many different fatty acids, like to produce those hormones, to actually make that hormone cascade happen. It's like when you kind of break it down to like just the very like raw materials perspective of like how are these things happening, like it's the food that you eat that's providing those nutrients to make all of those things happen. So.
Well, and stress management too. So we know there's a clear relationship between nutrition and mental health, nutrition and stress levels. Stress that mom has actually can impact the baby in utero and again into their adult life as well. So
a lot of epigenetic factors.
Right? Yeah, like, so not necessarily the nutritional epigenetics because it's stress related, but that is epigenetic as well.
Good question. Anybody else?